Trump announcing tariffs on imports from Canada of 35%.
Donald Trump signing into legislation a law intended to crack down on the flow of illicit fentanyl. I'm Andrew Rafferty, and this is On the Scene.
Canada isn't retaliating. They're going for the kill shot. Right now, over $2.8 billion worth of goods are stranded at the border. Factories in Michigan and New York are days away from shutdowns. But that's just the beginning, because Ottawa is preparing to cut off a U.S. state from something it literally can't survive without. This isn't about trade anymore. This is about economic survival, and Canada just changed the rules. Let me show you just how insane and dangerous this situation has become. Every single day, over $35 billion in goods crosses the Canada-US border. That's more trade in 1 week than most countries see in an entire year. Trump hit Canada with a crushing 35% tariff and blamed fentanyl. Yes, you heard that right. He accused Canada of inaction on stopping fentanyl and then torched North America's biggest trading relationship in response. And now your coffee is 35% more expensive. Lumber for that construction project is up 35%. Even the maple syrup on your pancakes just got political. But here's where things go nuclear. Trump isn't just playing hardball. He's threatening financial annihilation. He announced that if Canada retaliates with, say, a 40% tariff, he'll add that on top of his 35%, making it 75%. This isn't diplomacy. This is extortion dressed up as economic policy, and the worst part, Canada is about to hit back hard, and one U.S. state might not survive it. Here's the stat that should terrify every American watching this. Trump's tariff war is already hitting your wallet hard. The average U.S. household is now paying an extra $1,300 in 2025. Not in taxes, in prices. Because let's be clear, corporations don't eat tariffs, you do. From groceries to gas to construction supplies, every dollar of this trade war is coming straight out of your pocket. But this story just took a turn no one saw coming, and it could tear a U.S. state off the map. Let's talk about Alaska. It's the only U.S. state completely cut off by land. There's exactly one way to drive from Alaska to the rest of the U.S., and that's through Canada. There's no shortcut, no bypass, no back door. Just a long stretch of Canadian highway that the U.S. has taken for granted until now. Because guess what? Canada just realized it's holding a geopolitical chokehold and it's ready to squeeze. British Columbia quietly passed emergency legislation that would allow them to slap punishing tolls on all American commercial vehicles bound for Alaska. And they didn't stop there. They're considering a requirement that every U.S. truck must use Canadian-manufactured fuel additives or face massive non-compliance penalties. In other words, if you're hauling goods to Alaska, you either pay Canada or you don't get through. This isn't just a trade dispute anymore, this is geographic blackmail, and Canada just weaponized the map. This is where the story flips from shocking to absolutely insane. Because Canada isn't just squeezing Alaska anymore, they've launched a full-scale economic retaliation machine across the entire country. And every move is colder, more targeted, and more devastating than the last. Manitoba yanked every single American alcohol brand from liquor shelves, gone overnight. But the real detonation came from British Columbia. They didn't just ban U.S. products, they specifically targeted alcohol from red states that voted for Trump. This isn't just economic warfare anymore, this is political retaliation with surgical precision. But what really caught my attention, and honestly, should terrify Washington, is what Canada just built behind the scenes. It's called the Trade and Economic Security Task Force. Sounds dull, right? Like some sleepy government subcommittee. Wrong. This is Canada's economic war room, a centralized classified operation designed to identify choke points in U.S. supply chains and hit them hard. And according to leaks, this task force already has over 60 retaliation scenarios in motion. And here's the kicker. Some of those plans don't just target Trump states, they target entire industries. Agriculture, aviation, defense contracts, this isn't a bluff, it's a blueprint. And with every passing day, Canada's response gets smarter, nastier, and more coordinated. The United States thought it could strong-arm its neighbor, instead it woke a sleeping giant with a scalpel. And honestly, they're coordinating with indigenous communities, labor unions, and business leaders to maximize the pain on American companies. This isn't amateur hour. This is strategic economic warfare designed by professionals. You know what this reminds me of? Here's the reveal that changes everything and exposes just how fragile America really is. Alaska isn't just geographically isolated, it's economically trapped, and Canada holds the key. Over 90% of Alaska's food supply moves through Canadian territory. Not shipped by air, not floated in by sea, trucked through Canada every single day. And it gets worse. Alaska's oil industry, the backbone of U.S. energy independence, depends on critical parts, rigs, and heavy equipment that must cross Canadian land. No Canada, no oil, no energy security. And now the political trap is snapping shut. Alaska's Republican governor, its congressional delegation, all loyal to Trump, loud supporters of his tariff war. But now they're staring down the barrel of economic annihilation triggered by the very policy they backed. Canada isn't even breaking international law. They're just charging for infrastructure usage and enforcing environmental compliance. Sounds harmless until it strangles an entire U.S. state's economy. This is asymmetric warfare at its most brilliant and its most brutal. Trump threw a tariff punch. Canada responded by reaching for Alaska's oxygen line. And here's the part no one wants to admit. They could pull the plug anytime and Washington can't stop them. But wait, there's more. Remember all that talk about energy independence? Well, Canada supplies about 1/5 of U.S. oil imports and 85% of U.S. electricity imports. If they wanted to really turn the screws, they could start playing games with energy supplies. And before you say that would hurt Canada too, you're right. But Canada has been diversifying away from U.S. trade for years, building new relationships with Europe and Asia. They have options. Alaska doesn't. Here's what this really means for you, and why this isn't just some political drama you can ignore. That $1,300 per household I mentioned earlier, that's just the beginning. Because when trade wars escalate like this, it's not just about tariffs anymore. Supply chains break down, prices spike on everything from food to fuel to construction materials. So, companies start laying people off because their costs just became unpredictable. But here's what really gets me fired up about this situation. Both sides are playing chicken with people's livelihoods. Trump is using tariffs as a sledgehammer when he needs a scalpel. The fentanyl crisis is real. It's killing Americans every single day. But hitting Canada with massive trade penalties isn't going to stop Chinese fentanyl from flowing through Mexico. Meanwhile, Canada's response, while clever, could end up hurting ordinary Americans who had nothing to do with this decision. Alaska families didn't vote for a trade war, but they might end up paying for it with empty shelves and sky-high prices. But here's the counterintuitive truth that nobody's talking about. This trade war might actually be exactly what both countries need, just not for the reasons their leaders think. For decades, both Canada and the U.S. have been sleepwalking through their relationship. Canada got comfortable selling raw materials to America. America got comfortable having a quiet neighbor who never caused problems, but that comfort bred complacency. Canada never seriously diversified its economy away from U.S. dependence. America never had to think about what would happen if that relationship soured. This crisis is forcing both countries to confront some uncomfortable truths. Canada is realizing it needs to be less dependent on U.S. trade. America is discovering that alienating your closest ally has real consequences. The question is, will they learn these lessons before the relationship breaks completely? And all of this is happening at the worst possible moment, right as the global order is starting to crack. Tensions with China are boiling. Eastern Europe is still burning from ongoing conflict, and now the one thing the world could still count on, North American stability, is shattering in real time. This was supposed to be the world's safest trade relationship, but now it's being torn apart over a political stunt tied to drug trafficking accusations, and the whole world is watching. They're asking, if the U.S. will turn on Canada, what will they do to us? This isn't just a trade war, this is a global credibility collapse, and while Washington scrambles to contain the fallout, China and Russia are toasting the chaos. They're watching America alienate its closest ally, weaken its continental supply chains, and torpedo the very trust that built the global economic system. While the U.S. fights its neighbor, Beijing and Moscow are building new partnerships faster, cheaper, and without the drama. Because once allies stop trusting the U.S., they stop following it. And when that happens, America doesn't just lose trade, it loses power. So what happens next? Well, we're about to find out because this situation is escalating faster than anyone expected. August 7th is when reciprocal tariffs are expected to resume, and Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney is meeting with his cabinet and provincial premiers right now to coordinate the response. If Canada pulls the trigger on those Alaska route restrictions, we could see the first real test of how far this trade war can go before it breaks something permanently. But here's what I think is really going to happen. One of two things. Either cooler heads prevail in the next few weeks and both sides step back from the brink, or this escalates into the kind of trade war that reshapes North American economics for decades. There's no middle ground anymore. The stakes are too high, the position's too entrenched. Here's my final takeaway, and this is what I want you to remember long after you've finished watching this video. This isn't just about Canada and America. This is about what happens when leaders choose confrontation over cooperation. When they pick political points over people's prosperity. The Canada-US border has been called the world's longest undefended border for over a century. That wasn't just about military defense, it was about economic defense, about trust, about the idea that some relationships are too important to weaponize. But that era might be ending. And when it does, we'll all pay the price in our wallets, in our security, and in our faith that democracies can work together when it matters most. The question isn't whether this trade war will end. The question is, what kind of relationship will be left when it does? What happens next may shock you. Because while we've been focused on tariffs and trade, there's another story developing that could change everything we think we know about North American politics. Like, and subscribe if you want part 2 on how this trade war is secretly reshaping the entire North American political landscape. And comment below, do you think Canada is right to fight back this hard, or should they have taken a different approach? The next few weeks are going to be crucial. Don't miss what happens.